In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening and welcome. Forging into the last days of this amazing book. I did the reading and then I neglected to see where we stopped last time. Can anyone help? I think it was like session Shamatha 7 or something. Does that sound right?
Yes, because that's where my bookmark was. So that is a possible support for that.
504, 5, resting
That's what I have
4.
too.
Without support. Good. Thank you. Okay.
Sue made a point to be very specific about asking, so I think we would record that.
That's great. Yeah, that's smart. Interestingly, this text goes through resting without support and then back to breath as a support. As if, there was like a progression, and then so is the implication that breath is a further progression from without support? It's unclear. It was not that way in Moonbeams text. In Moonbeams, Tashi Namjal had breath as one of the sort of without concrete support, right? And then the without characteristics is tightening, loosening, and so forth, which is here the next session. Anyway, so 6, breath as a support. Another method for concentrating your mind is based on the breath. Retain the vase breath and rest without distraction. So the vase breath. Everybody familiar with vase breathing? Okay, so just briefly to the for like a sort of simple version of vase breathing. It basically explains it down below that basically you make your belly into the shape of a vase. Is the idea. That's where the name comes from. So you bring in the breath and you push it down, just like in the belly breathing or the deep abdominal breathing that I've been encouraging for a long time. Breathe down to the abdomen and then hold it lightly. And there's that's just like gently holding that is light vase breathing, and it gets more intense. Basically, the longer you hold it, and let's see. You can also, here it says when you can no longer hold it, release it fully. In a more intense versions, instead of releasing, you breathe in more. When you can't breathe anymore, you breathe in more. When you can't hold it anymore, you breathe in more. It's sort of counterintuitive, but the idea of not being able to breathe more is that you need more oxygen. So you bring in new oxygen and you bring it down, and then gradually release it. And there are other subtleties, I guess, on the more extreme versions, such as the length of time you hold it and so forth. But that's the general idea. So retain the vase breath, rest rather, without distraction. If you are unable to do that, concentrate on counting and so forth. Count your breath, moving in, moving out, and resting internally. Start with 21 cycles and then gradually increase to 100,000 and more. Just kidding. Focus on your nostrils and count your breath without letting your attention wander anywhere else. When concentrating on filling with breath and releasing it, begin by expelling your breath 3 times. That's expelling the stale breath, right? Then inhale and retain what you can, pressing it down below the navel, your navel. When you can no longer hold it, release it fully. Do that repeatedly without distraction. If dullness or agitation arises, apply the appropriate method for dispelling them. If you're not able to initiate resting using the techniques given above, you should use other suitable objects for meditation. So this sort of shifts into a separate section from breath as a support. This is sort of like the summary of all the previous options. But breath as a support, so one version is counting, and the other version is holding the breath. If dullness, I read that. So individuals are not necessarily all the same type. Understatement of the year. Some immediately get the instructions and develop shamatha. Others meditate a lot but have difficulty making any progress. Those who persevere without getting discouraged, for those who persevere without getting discouraged, it's impossible not to progress. Experienced gurus must be able to give instructions about how to dispel hindrances and enhance the development of meditation according to their students' abilities. Through sustaining meditation in that way, 3 levels of resting will develop. On the first level of resting, you will have many coarse thoughts, which are like waterfall falling from a mountain cliff. So these are the 5 stages, the stages of shamatha in the Treasury of Knowledge. The text by Jungkyung Kongtrul calls this the practice tradition version, whereas the sutra tradition version is the 9 stages of shamatha, according to Jungkyung Kongtrul. And in his version, there are 5 stages, and he cites Tilopa, and Trungpa Rinpoche also gives, I think, 5 stages in the Profound Treasury. But here we have a simpler 3-fold version. Starting with the waterfall. During the second level, your coarse thoughts will subside. At times, a thought may pop up suddenly, but you will notice it, and immediately it will be self-pacified. Now, there's a lot of gradations in between those two stages that I think we all are quite familiar with. Like a large river, meditation just continues flowing. Finally, both subtle and coarse thoughts subside, and there is a steady, non-conceptual state. Within a state of bliss, clarity, and non-conceptuality, there will arise stillness that is quiet, serene, vivid, vibrant, and crisp. A stillness. Until such stillness develops, you must arouse exertion. Once it has developed, keep practicing without interruption. So this term stillness, we'll see this comes up in the Vipassana section of like the still mind and the moving mind, right? And we see various versions there of like initially presenting them as if they're different. Like if there's the still mind, then there's no moving mind. You think, initially like my mind's very still because there's no movement. And then you think, well, my mind is moving and I've lost my stillness. So there's this sort of question of like, and then in other places we see that the still mind and the moving mind are not different. And there's a sense that even when there's movement, the still mind there might be the still mind lurking, It's a little unclear. And so I asked Elizabeth about this. Is it like there's part of your mind that is the still mind and when you progress in meditation, you gradually connect with that part of your mind? Or is the still mind a description of actually not having that many thoughts? Do you understand the distinction I'm trying to make? Right? And she said, well, it might help to know the Tibetan. And I think it did. The Tibetan is this term, the transliteration, in case this matters to you, is GNAS dot PA. And it's pronounced Nepa. And Nepa is resting, or a place. It has a variety of uses, ranging from a place like, it's a nice place, you would say, Nepa Sampa or something like that. And Nepa is also resting, as in resting meditation. No, it's not the term used in resting meditation versus analytical. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. That's confusing. But Nepa as it's like a station, and it's used to translate the Sanskrit, if this helps at all. Sthiti, Stiti, Sthiti, and Sthiti is like to place something, or like a place that you would put something, or like a station or a level, like you would achieve a certain station. And so it has this interesting range of possible meanings of, like, it's an actual place, to look just the idea of sort of placing or resting. So that it's a fairly broad usage, or a range of possibilities. And in thinking about it, before talking to her, I sort of came to this notion that, well, the mind doesn't have parts, right? But on the other hand, it has functions. It has 51 mental factors, right? But we don't find stillness and movement among them. Movement, we would generally say, happens on the fifth skandha of consciousness, and Nepa or stillness and movement are really a description of the fifth consciousness. That consciousness rests, or is still, or is moving. And we know that there's variations of movement. There's thoughts, memories, perceptions, emotions, things like that, the sense perceptions and so forth. The more crucial point comes when we see Vipassana later, in some circumstances, described as Vipassana is the investigation of the still mind discovered by shamatha, right? Does that ring any bells with people? Yeah, so then it's like, what is that? Is that an aspect of mind that Vipassana is investigating? It's a quality of mind. We also have mind is clear and aware. And then we have the essence of mind is empty, luminous, and unceasing. And then, we have Trungpa Rinpoche, who says there's Sem, and there's Lodro, and there's Rigpa, and there's all these different types of minds and aspects of mind. But I think the general idea is that mind is non-material, so it has no fixed nature or quality, essence, or something as being one thing or another, and it has all these different aspects. And I guess I end up thinking that the NAPA is basically discovering the the quality of mind that is the the sort of container for thoughts, for movement. So if you were to say, in the ocean, what's the move, what's the stillness, and what's the movement? I think we would all agree very quickly that the movement is the waves, right? And the stillness is at least from the very bottom of the ocean to like close to the waves, right? Would be still. So are those different or not? And I don't know. She didn't like give any definitive answer. Just like added that that's the term in Tibetan, and it conveys like in the Sanskrit usage, sthiti is like the establishment of a state of mind. It's like you establish mindfulness, or you establish vigilance. And you see these phrases like in Shantideva, of like, post the guard of vigilance at the door of the mind, and that would be like the sthiti sort of vigilance, the placement of vigilance. So I don't know if that probably that just confused things, but at least I've shared with you my confusion around like what is the resting mind and what is the moving mind. Because we'll see this come up in the Vipassana. So anyway, let's talk about it more as we encounter it. Cynthia.
I would say, based on what you just said, that you're resting in that container where thoughts take place. So, in one way, the thoughts aren't there, but you're in this space where thoughts just come out of who knows where, right? They just pop up. But yeah. Because I'm like, well, what are you resting in? And it must be that container.
Yeah, yeah. Another fun way of trying to think about this is the snow globe, right? You have a snow globe, and in the globe is some liquid, and then there's the flakes that are snow. And you shake it up, and the flakes mix with the liquid, and it's all hazy. And we've all seen this and heard this as an analogy for the mind before shamatha. We've seen the silt-filled pond, and then we let the silt or the snowflakes fall to the bottom. So is the resting mind the liquid and the moving mind the flakes? Cynthia.
Well, a couple of things. One, as you were talking, and even with this recent analogy, on one hand, it could be the space, but I would also say there's the possibility that it could be the momentary experience, however long those moments last, of when all the snow is settled, when there isn't movement. But it's not necessarily a quality or a container. It could also just be a moment of experience or multiple moments of experience that are not involved with active thoughts. So, because I hear this sort of some of these things are kind of there's a sort of a thingness about the way some of these possibilities are being described. And it seems like it's also possible to not make it into a structural thing, but just a kind of a different kind of moment.
That's what I came to initially before I discussed this with Elizabeth. I came to this idea. Well, mind is not really a thing, and it has a range of experiences, and when it's experiencing lack of movement, then it's still. and when it's moving, then there's moving.
And
And
I
she
think, yeah, I'm sorry,
she
were you going to say more? Go
well,
ahead.
it's the Tibetan is Nepa and the Sanskrit is Stiti, sort of sort of as an alternative to what I had proposed, almost.
And then the other thing that I was just going to mention, because you mentioned the description of the five, well, the part about the five stages, the waterfall, and all those things. And I can't remember exactly the source. You may know this as well, but Trungpa, in something that I read recently, it might have been one of the Four Foundations transcripts. I'm not sure, but he made a point of saying they're all the same. Like there's a tendency to look at them as a progression. We typically look at it as, you know, and even a sort of a worst to best kind of thing. But he actually had this little paragraph where he was completely throwing out that notion of better, worse, and just that they're all the same.
Yeah, that's at the end of his presentation of the nine stages.
Okay, I couldn't remember where I saw it, but
In
I,
my opinion, in my humble opinion, that's skillful means.
I was curious about that because it was sort of shocking because
Yeah,
it's so
that's him saying
unusual.
that. That's him saying, well, these people are not going to ever, or anytime soon, rather, get past three or four. But like many things that he presented, like the five paths and bodhisattva levels, he presented all of these advanced things and the four yogas as like you can have glimpses of them in your own experience at this stage of that. And that's sort of the thing that he said with the nine stages. You can have experiences of them. And he was sort of, by doing that, he's indicating that these can, in addition to being viewed as like stages, literal like places along the way, they can be also viewed as each one having a certain quality or aspect. And he's saying you can have that, you can touch on that quality. Like equanimity is the final stage, and you can have that quality anytime, glimpses of that.
Yeah, that was kind of the impression I got when he said this about those five stages was just that, like, not to put such a value judgment on them as, you know, one is a beginner and one is a superstar or whatever, but just like all these things happen. Um,
The other thing is with the snow globe, is the still mind the container?
uh, well, I don't,
Something to think about.
yeah, I know you've
Let's
used
not
this
answer
as a,
that.
I'm inclined to say no because if the still mind were the container, then when you've shaken it all up and it's got all sorts of stuff going on, I mean, you're saying that the still mind is what's holding all of that.
I'm saying the still mind is still there.
But
As
well,
as they do say at times, like when the still mind is present, they are well. We'll see how that's described. But Eric, what is your take
Yeah,
on
my take, I guess, has been maybe like without actually sort of understanding a lot of this and working through it the way we're doing now, has been more the metaphor or the example of like a pond and water or whatever, air and sound. It's really this, I mean, movement and stillness are just two different states of the same thing. And that as an experiment, in our practice, we find that, at least I find, if I try to, our tendency is when stillness seems to have some kind of bonus point added to it for us. We tend to see it
definitely?
that way. We're trying to get still, but if we grasp at that, what we get is movement. But if we
Well,
grasp at the movement,
that's clear. Yeah, that's clear.
yeah.
Uh, Grasping ruins the whole thing. But
But
the
by the same token, if we grasp at, or if we focus on, if we stare directly at the movement, we get something that feels more still.
right. So the question is then: is there a gradation, or is it an absolute? Like when there's stillness, there's no movement, and when there's movement, there's no stillness. Or is there like stillness that has a little bit of movement, but not a lot of movement.
Well, like if you look at the pond, I mean, like depending on how fast the frog is kicking, you get,
So in that case, yeah, the water is the stillness, and even when they're mixed together fully, there's stillness and movement mixed
I would say the
in the
water is the
pond.
water, and the water is either still or it's moving.
But it's not always, it's rarely absolutely still. It's
Yeah,
usually,
that may be, but it's still, I mean, it's
Isn't
moving
there,
anyway,
around.
isn't there a
Mary Beth.
Moonbeams paragraph on that
Yeah,
specifically?
yeah, see, you can see if you can find it, but Mary Beth.
So I coincidentally just happen to have this thematic concordance of terminology from,
All right.
and
Treasury of Knowledge, Book
yeah,
6.
yeah, and NAPA is in here, and it says that it's duration.
That's great. It's the remaining. That's great. It's used in a different way even there, or that translator. Who is the translator of that? That's
It's not her.
yeah,
It's I have to find it because it's different people doing different parts.
that's okay. Anyway, it's an interesting thing for us to think about. So let us continue onward, and we'll see how it's further used. Through sustaining meditation, in that way, 3 levels of resting develop. We did the first one. Um, we did the second one. Finally, both subtle and coarse thoughts subside, and there is a steady, non-conceptual state. Within a state of bliss, clarity, and non-conceptuality, there will arise stillness that is quiet, serene, vivid, vibrant, and crisp. So stillness arises. Until such stillness develops, you must arouse exertion. Once it has developed, keep practicing without interruption. That was the 6th. 7, tightening, loosening, and subverting. If the 3 levels of resting do not develop, increase your exertion and practice by tightening, loosening, and using subversive meditation. Tightening means to intensify your physical posture, gaze, and awareness. Tightening with self-control. Tighten with self-control. Do not let yourself be distracted for a second. Focus as if you were crossing a river on a bridge made of a single plank. Without any object of meditation, arouse a strong flow of meditation with just the right amount of tension, not allowing yourself to be distracted for even an instant. Do frequent, short sessions. Loosening uses trollcore and gazes, but has no reference point for meditation at all. So trollcore, we some of us know trollcore from Khenpo Tsochen Gyaltso taught trollcore, and some of the people he taught it to have taught that. And his trollcore is a variation on traditional trollcore, which is these exercises that are done as part of the first of the 6 dharmas of Naropa, the Dumo, the inner heat practice. And they're these intense physical movements that are meant to get the winds moving, the energy flowing, and develop some warmth and pliancy in the body and mind. So loosening uses trollcore. We move about in a sort of energetic way. And Khenpo also encouraged ha shaking, just like shaking our limbs, our hands, our feet, our whole body, so, just like loosening everything up, right? And gazes, which is not immediately clear what gazes are, but it usually refers to like downward, straight ahead, and upward, but has no reference point for meditation at all. So it's I don't know, it has no reference point for meditation. So I guess the idea is it's the opposite of tightening, which has a very specific reference point, and loosening has no object. Regardless of what occurs, leave your mind at ease in its own state, without contrivance, with no sense of ownership or fuss. The technical term, fuss. Be buoyant and relaxed, naturally settled, comfortable and effortless. Rest at ease like a small child with a full stomach, or a sheaf of hay when its rope has been cut, which is a very famous analogy for Mahamudra practice. Within that state, aroused flashes of mindfulness, simply free from wandering. It's interesting that those are in the loosening, like those have sort of an energetic quality. Don't do any meditation other than that. Just sort of periodically be vividly present. Leave your mind in its own state. Make your short sessions a bit longer. While you are resting quietly, interrupt that and take a break. Between sessions, simply maintain the light touch of mindfulness. You may also need to use subversive meditation. When you aren't distracted, thoughts don't arise. As soon as you are distracted, which is a funny statement, because to some extent we think that distraction and thoughts are equivalent, right? Like, how can you be it says when you aren't distracted, thoughts don't arise. So if you are distracted, thoughts will arise. But what are you distracted by? It implies there's something other than thoughts that you could be distracted by. You could be distracted by sense perceptions or emotions, which can either or not be considered as thoughts. But as soon as you are distracted or a situation suddenly presents itself, many thoughts appear. When that happens, you may wonder, should I get rid of them? Don't reject them. See them as useful. Allow them to come, saying, come, as many as you can. Invite your thoughts. Rinpoche calls this a thought party, I believe. Notice them as they arise, one after another. Even if you were to reject them, they wouldn't go away. They cannot be chased down. Be free from hopes and fears, such as taking delight in stillness, being upset with movement, fearing that your meditation will not progress, or hoping that it will go well. Take the thought itself to be a support for concentration. Blocking thoughts in order to create non-conceptuality does not work. That's a key part of it. You must take the thought itself as your object and rest right there. Rest in the stillness of thought. In other words, once thoughts vanish, being self-pacified, non-conceptuality will arise as a matter of course. Practice in that way. And that was the 7th session. 8, authentic shamatha. Next, the way shamatha develops and is pointed out is as follows. Authentic shamatha is the mental state in which all distractions involving thoughts and the conceptualizing of characteristics have been pacified. Free from dullness, agitation, and sluggishness, that mind rests one-pointedly in its non-conceptual essence. Previously, shamatha involved effort. Now, without relying on any effort, it comes easily, is comfortable and spacious, and continues with ease. Even when you get up from your meditation, your mind doesn't change in any way. You continue to abide in that same state of shamatha. While walking, sitting, and so forth, your mind is slow yet resplendent, loose, unconstrained, and serene. Appearances seem to float by, vague and amorphous. If you do not intentionally pay attention to objects, you won't notice their details. Your mind does not wander. The experiences of bliss, clarity, and non-conceptuality may be present in equal proportions, or one may predominate. Many different visual experiences auditory experiences, supercognitive abilities, and even miraculous powers are developed. Any of the 10 signs and the like may occur. Let's see, does she give the 10 signs in somewhere in the glossary of enumerations? 10 signs, she does on page 653. So the 10 signs, she quotes from a gentleman named Notro Rabjampa. His precious jewel garland of eloquence lists the following 10. Smoke, meaning like internally you're seeing, you have like an image of smoke. Mirage, fireflies. So these are images that appear without your eyes open traditionally. These are like inner images. Fireflies, sky, candle flames, the moon, sun, blazing, bindus, and rainbows. Other versions of this list are found. And this goes back to the earliest of meditative traditions. The Theravada tradition as well lists these, has various lists for these. So basically the idea is as you disconnect your consciousness from your sensory faculties, like the habitual engagement between the mind and the sense faculties, they sort of go haywire a little bit. And this can happen like as you fall asleep. You might experience these without being in any significant level of shamatha. You might experience them, as well as spontaneously on other odd occasions. Thus, the arising of flawless shamatha in your mind stream is the foundation for the development of all excellent qualities, including vipassana. At this time, no matter what good or bad experiences you have, be they physical illness, mental suffering, positive or negative dreams, supercognitive abilities, miraculous powers, bliss, clarity, or non-conceptuality, do not cling to them. Be certain that they have no essence. Do not entertain happy thoughts or sad ones. If you fixate on experiences, you create the root for circling in one of the three samsaric realms, desire, form, or formless, and you will not be liberated from cyclic existence. The outsiders, non-Buddhists, have this much, that is, these experiences, but they are not benefited by them. In brief, if you fixate on any of your experiences or realizations, you will destroy yourself. It's a little bit dramatic, but I think it means you'll destroy your practice. But so the Tibetan tradition entirely views shamatha as something that's common to non-Buddhists, that the Buddha learned from other teachers, and that was prevalent in the traditions at that time and since that time. And that vipassana was the main distinction of the Buddhist teachings, and that's pretty much common throughout Mahayana Buddhism as well. However, in certain streams of Theravadan Buddhism dispute that and assert the exact opposite, that vipassana was a common practice and that the use of shamatha to experience detachment from the various realms was completely unique to the Buddha. And in particular, the practice of combining shamatha, the absorptions, with vipassana practice was the unique invention of the Buddha. And traditionally in Theravadan Buddhism, such as that of the path of purification of Buddhaghosa, the practice of the jhana states, the absorption states, is standard practice, and they are used as the basis for insight into the unsatisfactoriness of samsara and liberation from samsara. And he gives a whole complicated scheme of what insight meditation is that derives from the absorption states, which is another whole kettle of fish. But within a state free from any attachment to those experiences and devoid of entangling fixations, prolong your meditation. Propel it with the oar of exertion. If you can meditate while you have difficulties, your excellent qualities will exceed your imagination. Therefore, train yourself accordingly. Both the master and the student must be unmistaken about the actual way to give rise to experiences, understanding, and realization at triad, thus ensuring recognition. Key part of this is if you can meditate while you have difficulties, your excellent qualities will exceed your imagination. I think many of us have been through periods in life or days when we have difficulties and it's difficult to meditate. And we sort of say, oh, well, I'm having these difficulties in my meditation. But, we don't expect our meditation to be that great. Leave it at that. But mainly the following.
One of the favorite slogans.
Yeah, if you can train while
practice with difficulties, you are well trained.
Yeah. Mainly the following are most important. Do not be attached to sense pleasures for the sake of this lifetime. What does that mean? For the sake of this lifetime. Do not be attached to sense pleasures for the sake of this lifetime. The sake of this lifetime. Have uncontrived devotion for your guru. Perfect your bodhicitta with the 6 kinds of beings, presumably having relative bodhicitta with all 6 realms of beings, presumably. Free from distraction, maintain the light touch of mindfulness. Feeling you can't delay, shorten your perspective and maintain your convictions. That's an interesting advice in life, right? Feeling you can't delay. Where life is, time is getting short as we get older, right? There's a sense of death is coming, right? So shorten your perspective, instead of like, well, there's this long trajectory of meditation practice, and I'm going to do a retreat next year, and then, I'm going to do a program, like, how about like tomorrow, I guess. Don't be swayed by the usual human concerns or the 8 worldly qualities. If you practice that way, free from errors, experiences and realizations will arise effortlessly. Apply yourself accordingly. That was the 8th session, and it completes the shamatha section. So B is Vipassana 1, session 1. They don't have session, the word session, they just have 1. Oh, they didn't have session before either. So anyway, looking with stillness, whatever that is. Hold the essential points for the body as before. Your gaze is very important in this context. Without blinking, let your eyes wander or flutter. Without blinking, letting your eyes wander or flutter, look vacantly with bulging eyes into the center of the empty space directly in front. I think the term directly, it means like not far from your face. It could be interpreted to be like straight ahead, but other places I've seen they give like an actual length, which is very close, like 8 finger widths or something of that nature. And then this thing of not blinking and letting your eyes wander is serious. Like, we don't really take this seriously because we're taught that if you don't blink, you damage your eyes, right? But there's also a presentation by Dzongkhar Khyentse Rinpoche on Nundro, and at the end of his Nundro manual, I think I've circulated this in one class or another course or another. He has a little presentation on shamatha, and he says there, do not blink. And that you will find that after some period of time, you will be able to maintain your eyes open without blinking, without harming your eyes. Initially it feels strained, and we all think our eyes are going to get dry and damaged, but there's many people have done this for many years without harming their eyesight, and that's what they do. Straight ahead. I've seen this in numerous books. And there's the other one that we see somewhere sometimes, and he mentions is that the mouth is slightly open, and that you don't move at all, even if you're drooling. And if you're drooling, you just keep drooling. And he makes a big fun out of it because it's some sort of cancer shit, right? But we've seen, I think many of you, we've been through readings where they talk about like having a lap cloth for the drool, right? Does that ring any bells? So, interesting practices that we don't commonly do. Remain quietly within flawless stillness. There's that stillness with your mind naturally settled in its own state, without contrivance, with no sense of ownership or fuss. So here we have stillness and settled, this presented separately, without contrivance, no sense of ownership. Ownership, like I'm doing it, and no like fussing about how or in what way, except intensifying that slightly aroused a flash of undistracted mindfulness, brilliant and sharp. Now, that's an interesting thing. It's like, how do you rouse that mindfulness? It's like the Tibetans, they will, in the 3 words that strike the heart, the commentary talks about hurling the letter, the syllable pot, to pierce the conceptual mind, the space of the mind. When your shamatha is going well, look closely at the nature of your mind. Now, we learned earlier that the nature of your mind is luminous, but I don't know if that's what he means here. Does it have a color, form, or shape? Does it arise, cease, or abide? Is it existent, non-existent? Does it reside externally or internally? That's a funny one, right? Or is it something to be known apart from just that stillness? That's a good question. It may be an emptiness that cannot be identified as anything, a nothingness. Alternatively, it may be that within stillness, the mental state that cannot be identified is vivid, crisp, stark, something you do not know how to describe. The nature of stillness may be a stupefied, dark mental state, which is clearly not the correct version, or it may be clear, sharp, and naked. But interestingly, he says there's like a dull stillness. Right? This approach contains all the critical and key points related to the abiding state. So this approach, this is like these 2 paragraphs apparently contain all the crucial points. It's a little cryptic, right? And yet those with just a theoretical understanding who have only heard the instructions and who used lofty Dharma jargon have a mind stream bound by the 8 worldly qualities that they try to pass off as fabulous experiences and realizations. Pretending something has arisen in their mind stream when it has not, they pull the wool over their eyes and deceive themselves. I wonder if he uses this analogy, pulling the wool over their eyes, if that's a translation. If they are monastics, they have impaired their vows by lying about their attainments. So, pretending something has arisen in their mind stream. So, he's saying they might pretend that stillness has arisen in their mind stream, right? Stillness arising in your mind stream. What does that mean? Partially the crux of this is that he and Tashi Namgyal and others come to the point of saying that basically you can't really describe the mental state accurately or precisely. and it's it's like you know it when you experience it. You will know that these descriptions are what you've experienced, sort of thing. Therefore, 509, to continue, therefore be rigorous in your practice, like pulverizing bones with a rock. I guess a common practice in Tibet. It is not something out there to be patched together by conceptuality. It must be genuine experiences and realizations arising within you, right here, through the force of meditation. Now, her terminology, the terminology "it" is not something out there. It must be genuine experiences. So the "it" is a little unclear. What's the "it"? And it turns out to be plural. It must be genuine experiences. So, going back to the second paragraph of the Passion on the page before, the nature of stillness would probably be the "it."
Or the abiding state in the bottom paragraph of 508. First sentence.
Yeah, the abiding state. It's a little bit confusing now. It would be plural. It must be genuine experiences and realizations. So that makes it sound more like the "it" is like the experience of the abiding state, or the experience of stillness and so forth. Anyway, that to parse it in that way presumably would be to fall into conceptuality, right? Tighten up your awareness and look. Then take a break. Again, look. Look at the nature of the still mind. In this context, the approach to settling your mind is to remain clear, lucid, and radiant, like the sun free from clouds. At times, energize your awareness and strive to look at its nature. So, to do this, in addition to having some sense of stillness from shamatha, you have to know how to energize. This has come up a number of times. How to create a clear, vivid flash, sort of mindfulness, crisp and sharp. So those two things are needed. And then look at the nature of the still mind. Since this is the first way to give the pointed out instructions, gurus should closely check and question the students according to their abilities. Some have trained, but they can be deceptive and should be repeatedly questioned, referring to those who have read the book and know the answer, like us, right? Understandings, meditation experiences, realizations, and experiences should be pointed out without being mixed with Dharma terminology. Students should make efforts accordingly. So that's like the hint, when you get examined. Don't explain things like intellectually or using at all fancy jargon. Hint, right? To look at the nature of the mind is the first session. 2, looking with movement. To cut through a root or basis of mind, pointed out instructions should be given in relation to movements directly, or once the movements of thoughts have been investigated. The essential points for the body, the gaze, and conduct are the same as before. Within a blissful, clear, and non-conceptual state, vivid and relaxed. So that's a prerequisite, that quality of shamatha. A fleeting thought may suddenly appear, or you should arouse the thought about something suitable. Not quite sure what suitable is here. Look at the nature of that active mind. Look at when it is active. Look at where it is active. What is its color and shape? What are its origin, resting place, and destination like? Does it reside externally, or is it internal, within the body? If it is internal, is it in the center of the heart, we're somewhere else. Interestingly, even though it's a given that the mind is not material, they ask all these questions about it as if it was a material phenomenon: color, shape, and location. Mary Beth. Oh,
It does seem very real.
yes, that's yeah, that's the main point. Thank you for that. Yeah. So even though, like, we know it's not a material thing, and so therefore logically it can't have a shape and so forth, it feels like it does, right? It feels like it's there. And that's what we're exploring. We're exploring that feeling. Like, you wouldn't say your mind resides externally, and you wouldn't say it's in your butt or your feet. You would say, it's somewhere on the upper part of my body or something, right? We all have a feeling of that. So that's what we're exploring. We're exploring that feeling as, even if we know it's not a logical feeling, because we know intellectually that mind is immaterial, we still have this immediate or ongoing, constant, instantaneous presumption of my mind being somewhere, being here. And when we say, look at your mind, we know what to do. It's not like, oh, I can't look at my mind because it's not material. We all say, okay, I'm looking at my mind. Aaron.
It suddenly occurs to me that something I take for granted in all of this is a little weird, which is what's looking.
Yeah, hey,
I mean, I guess
thank you.
we've touched upon.
He doesn't explain the looking. He brings that up. He says, look, and then look again, take a break, again, look at the nature of the still mind. And I think that's intentional, that he doesn't give like secret instructions, intellectual instructions, or like some way to look. But I think it's helpful to talk about it, but they never really describe the looking. They describe what you're looking for, and that implies the looking,
But maybe I should say who's looking, not just the act of looking, but
yeah,
what
well,
it's like. Isn't this like what Trump or which I used to say? Can a razor cut itself?
we'll get to that. You have to start with looking at different aspects of the mind, and then the last stage is you look at the looker.
I think keeping it as what's looking is just as good as, I mean, what or who, or sort of think about both and what's the difference of those. I think that is significant too.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, I was just going to say something quickly. Maybe this is obvious to everybody, but when he's asking these questions, is it here? Is it internal? I guess the sort of the verbiage I tacked on in my own mind is something like articulate your implicit beliefs about the mind. Like he's just asking you to spell out your own unexamined implicit beliefs, and you really got to do the work to recognize, yeah, there is a part of me that thinks it's here, and there's actually another part of me that thinks it's over here, and another part of me thinks it's this, and sort of only exhuming all that is a way to really critically reflect on it, but you have to kind of admit that you do think it's substantial.
That is a key, crucial step, instead of like, well, we know it's not there intellectually because the mind is empty and luminous, so it doesn't have a shape and size and color and so forth. But yeah, we have to go through that stage of acknowledging that we have a continual sense of our mind being here in some way. And so, what is that way in which we believe it's here? Is it where, we probably don't believe it has a color. I don't know if that's, maybe some people do, but we certainly have a sense of it like being located somewhere, and anything located somewhere has a shape implicitly, right? It's not like a big up and down line. Would you say that your mind is like this or like this? We all have some notion that our mind is there in some way around here in some shape. So, yeah, definitely the looking.
That thing. Well, yeah, it's the thing full of thoughts and feeling. But like, what is that thing full of thoughts and feeling?
Yeah.
And that's what it, yeah, that's what you're like, wait,
Is
where
it
is the color
full?
and the shape?
Is it actually full? Full implies you can't put any more.
Right.
It seems to have an endless capacity, right?
Yeah.
Stuff some more thoughts in there. Did old thoughts come out when you stuff new thoughts in? Does it have a limited capacity?
It seems like as we're looking, there's also, I guess, a little bit of tendency that we mix what are actually just sensory experiences with the looking, right? That, so like we have feelings, and so because they come up when we're doing this, you tend to sort of think that, oh, that's it, but it's really just a feeling. And so then there's that sort of, I think, a discrimination that we have to go through to be able to separate that. I don't know if other people have that experience.
Well, that's the water and the particles, right? It's like our mind, we have like anger or impatience or something. And so are we going to look at the impatience or are we going to look at the mind that's
Oh, I,
impatient?
I was actually thinking even not so much into the like full blown emotions, but more of a just a kind of tactile sen sensory emotion that I know that's that's one that comes up for me. Just that because I guess of the perhaps it's because of the intensification that happens when you're doing this kind of thing, that you the extent of presence, there's I think a heightened awareness of just kind of the feeling of being. And so then I have to kind of remember, oh yeah, that's actually just sort of sensory experience, not make it into something, I think that's where I mean, to me, that seems like there's a little mixing that goes on.
So would you look at that sense of presence, or when you look, would you try to distinguish that from something else that you're looking at?
I would at least try to acknowledge that the possibility that that's just a feeling, a bodily sensation, so as not to get caught on that as being like some it, and then keep looking, or keep investigating.
It's similar to shape and size and color, if it has a feel to it.
Exactly. Well, that's where I'm saying I think that there's a tendency to mix, you know, experiential.
But isn't that like what Zeke was pointing out, that you have to acknowledge that you have that, and to look at that, actually, that's what we look at.
Yes, I'm not disagreeing with what he said. I think I'm agreeing with it. I'm just giving one example of it that from my own experience that I don't know if other people have that.
Yeah, like sometimes your mind is heavy and sometimes it's light.
Cynthia,
Um,
I,
Zeke,
that's not the way it comes for me, but that's okay. That could be one version.
Cynthia, I'm really resonating with what you're saying, and I think I would put it like this, and I wonder if this is how it feels to you. It's sort of like, hey, examine every single way that you've ever, in any way, shape, or form, taken the mind to be substantial. And one subset of those ways is like cognitive beliefs. Like, oh, it turns out I believed my mind had a location. But there's other ways that we take our mind to be substantial that aren't as cognitive, that aren't as easily like written out as a proposition that I believed it. It's like just the feeling tone of my life implicated the belief that my mind was substantial. Like just the way I reacted in that moment, like this kind of sub feeling thing was taking my mind in its like, substantial thinginess. And so what I'm hearing you saying, Cynthia, is like open yourself to all of those kind of illusory experiences, not just like mental propositional ones, and see them
sounds
all as
good.
illusory.
It's like being insulted or embarrassed. Is a good has a certain reaction. We have like this feeling of meanness, or my mind, and like, oh, my mind got, felt larger, you know, or whatever. Or I felt small, like I walked into this situation and I felt very small. Whatever it is, it's examining, looking at all of these ways that we feel that our mind is present, or that we are minding, which are two different things, really, but we mix them together. Right?
I think one time when we were exploring this in one of the Sopni Rinpoche's retreats, and so we were kind of talking about this, but it was somewhat in the context, I don't know if the topic was Bardo at the time, that if we're looking at at the time of death and, wanting to be able to recognize during that time, at that point the body will be gone. And so then all of these things that we associate with looking for nature of mind or anything that we may that's body based will not be there. And so that was part of the context, I think, as well, of trying to discriminate that kind of tendency to.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, anyway, that's very interesting stuff.
Okay, so within a blissful, clear, non-conceptual state, vivid and relaxed, a fleeting thought may suddenly appear, or you should arouse a thought about something suitable. Look at the nature of that active mind. Look at when it is active. Look at where it is active. What is its color and shape? What are its origin, resting place, and destination like? Does it reside externally, or is it internal within the body? If it is an internal, is it in the center of the heart, or somewhere else? And he says that because in Tibet, as in many Eastern countries, the common belief is that the mind is in the center of the body and the heart.
One little comment on that section you just read, I just noticed, I don't think I had noticed this before, but it kind of it reminds me of what you were talking about with the still mind and the question of its nature. But here, when he says, look at the nature of that active mind, he's not exactly saying look at the thought. He's asking us to look at the nature of the active mind, which is kind of an interesting parallel to what you were talking about before about still mind, right?
Yep.
As if there's sort of like a mind being active as opposed to just thought.
Yeah.
So,
As opposed, right. So the still mind, we tend to think is mind without thought, but it could be that there's still mind that's seen when there's no thought, but that the still mind is like a type of mind.
and so likewise the active mind. So it's kind of an interesting. It adds more.
And mind comes in moments, right? So there's mind moments, and you have one type of mind every moment. So you could have like a variety. You can have a different type of mind for a few moments, and then you have another type of mind. They're very fast. Examine this by asking yourself, wherever it is, outside or inside the body, how does mind rest and how is it active? Is mind an entity? Is it a non-entity? Does it arise, cease, have a color or shape? If so, what are those like? Is it something about which you think it does not have such attributes? Or even though there is nothing thought of as this is it, is there still something known that does not arise, cease, and so on? When you look at thoughts, is it that all thoughts are empty, free from conceptual elaborations without arising or ceasing? Or is it that having looked at a thought, it vanishes without a trace? Or is it that all thoughts arise without being identified? If they arise without being identified, is there the thought there is nothing to identify at that time or not? So many questions. Once a thought appears, or you have caused one to appear, which also is like, how do you cause the thought to appear? And like, who's the you, and where's our you in the thought, and what did you do to cause the thought to arise? It's endless. Endless questions. Once a thought appears, or you've caused one to appear, look at its nature without blocking it or grasping at it. When you have happy ones or sad ones, look at their nature. I like that. Is the nature of a sad thought different from the nature of a happy thought, rather? Like, are they a different color, or different shade, or different place? They occur in a different place, or different size. Create many thoughts and look. When strong ones, such as those involving the 5 poisonous mental afflictions, arise, or you create them, also look. Is there a difference between the thought itself, the object of the thought, and the immediately preceding thought or mind? Yeah, so but this is crucial, right? The difference between the thought itself and the object of the thought, for starters, right? So a thought is a movement of mind, right? And thoughts have reference. Thoughts refer to different things. We tend to mix the thought and the reference. I had a thought about my car, and that's a car thought. But there's a thought, and it refers to the car. That's the referent. And basically, thoughts are thoughts, and they have a sameness quality to them, but they can point to or refer to many different things. And the difference between a thought that refers to an object like a car versus a thought that refers to world peace, something very lofty, or emptiness, they're the same, right? They're just thoughts. And then there's the immediately preceding thought or mind. So the idea is you have a state of mind, and then you give rise to a thought. And is that thought different from the mind that you had from which you gave rise to the thought? Look to be, and that's no longer present because it was the immediately preceding, but can you look at something that's not present? How can you look at something that's not present? Look to be certain that you cut your misinterpretations from within. So that's an interesting statement. It's like you cut your misinterpretations from within, and he doesn't say like you establish certainty, but you eliminate uncertainty or wrong ideas. It's like every way that you think about thoughts and the mind is really not the way they are, basically. If you see the nature of thoughts as naked clarity awareness, look. Is there a difference between the naked clarity awareness that you saw before while resting and the naked clarity awareness that you see now with thoughts? Ooh, that's getting complicated. So the definition of mind in the standard traditions of Buddhism is clarity awareness, clear and aware. So is there a difference between that raw quality of mind as being naked clarity awareness that you saw before while resting, and then the naked clarity awareness when there's movement? Does that mind, is it a different quality of mind? If you're not certain, look carefully. Drawing a thought in and placing it in clarity awareness is not the way to look. That's an interesting idea. Like, we tend to think, okay, I've identified a thought. There's that thought about my car that I mentioned. I'm going to draw that thought in, and I'm going to stare at it. I'm going to stare it down. And I'm going to place it in that clarity awareness so I get a damn good look at it. To see that a suddenly arising thought is of the same nature as the original ordinary mind, which is not adulterated in any way, is it. He gives the answer. They're all the same. It's all the same mind stuff playing games on us. It's like a hall of mirrors, like looking like it's different things, right? In brief, in keeping with the way the student's experiences develop, both the master and student must differentiate between correct and mistaken development. In that way, you will gain certainty and cut through a basis and root. Apply yourself to those pointed out instructions for looking and to those ways of looking. It's sort of like if you think you got it, you've missed it. And to the extent that you have like this feeling of like, when I really look at my mind, I don't know what's going on. It's like, I don't know the difference between the clarity awareness and the thoughts and the this and the that. And it's sort of like, well, that's getting it. Is not being able to identify and label and classify and capture, the mind as having this or that type or quality or aspect or form. That was the second session. And, maybe we'll do one more. 3, looking with appearances and the body. In order that the inseparability of appearances and mind may be pointed out. So they're inseparable. Okay. You should look at your mind right with appearances. The essential points for the body and the gaze are before. Direct your focus and eyes one pointedly to a specific object. So this part is different. Instead of looking at the center of space, you look at an object. Be it a column, a vase, or a sacred image. Columns were commonplace things, I guess, in Tibet, right? They didn't have like beams and stuff that they could hide the columns in the walls, and Rinpoche famously puts columns in the Karma Cholan shrine room, right? And the architect is like, fights with him, no, we don't need these columns. They're not, structurally, we don't need them. They get in the way of the visibility. And, he's like, no, we have to have columns. Be it a column or vase or a sacred image. Mount Meru. Looking at Mount Meru, okay. Or some other suitable form in the space in front. Look directly at it, then rest a while with relaxed attention. Again, look. It's funny, like having practicing looking and then resting. What would you do when you're resting? How would you not look? You would have to like avert your eyes, probably. Similarly, look at the nature of sounds. Look clearly not the visual type of looking, if you're looking at sounds, right? Which are objects for your ears, which is not an accurate statement. They're an object for the ear, sense faculty, right? Look at pleasing sounds, displeasing sounds, loud ones, soft ones, various ones, existent ones, non-existent ones. That's my favorite. How are you going to look at non-existent sounds? That's really good. Those uttered by yourself and by others, and so on.
I guess you could look at a thought that you have that you didn't say. That would be a non-existent sound that you.
Or there's a song by the Grateful Dead, Ripple, something about all the lines that have never been sung or something. I have to find it. Anyway, existent ones, non-existent ones, those uttered by yourself or by others, and so on. Also look at the fragrant and foul odors that appear as objects for your nose, the delicious and unsavory tastes experienced by your tongue, and the sensations of pleasure and comfort, hot and cold, sickness and pain, that are tangible objects experienced by your body. Whatever occurs, look at that. When you do so, do those appearances stop, or do you and the appearances appear to be separate? When you look at them, do the appearances stop, or do you and the appearances appear to be separate? Do appearances come to the mind, or does the mind reach out to the appearances, thinking, this appears? This part is interesting, right? That's a little confusing. This, why would it, when you look at appearances, why would they stop? Is it like thoughts? When you look at thoughts, they dissolve? Is that the idea? Or do you say that since appearances in mind are inseparable, there is just vivid appearance, emptiness, no objects? That's too smart, right? Alternate between looking at the thought that is looking. There you go. Looking at the thought that is looking and looking at any one of the five objects. Interestingly, when they say to look at your mind, they ask about color and shape, but they don't ask about sound. Does your mind have a sound? Does it sound like something? Does your mind smell like something? Does your mind taste like something? Does it feel like something? Let's see. Alternate between looking at the thought that is looking and looking at any one of the five objects. Can you see any difference between those two? Look, what is the difference between the appearing object and the perceiving thought? When you look at an object, if it is clearly out there, is there something that you think is that way? Or, without there being any such thought, is it that there seems to be no difference between the unceasing and transparent object and the looking mind, which is free without grasping and of no particular significance? The looking mind is of no particular significance. Not quite clear what that means. In that case, is there not even the thought, there is no distinction? If there is something about which you think that object is clearly out there, look, what exactly is that something you think is that way like? Let me try that again. What exactly is that something you think is that way like? What exactly is that something you think is that way like? Took a few tries. Also, look at your body and mind. Are they the same or different? If they are the same, is it that the body being born and perishable and the mind something not born, not perishable and permanent, permanent, are the same? If they are different, the body and mind must be identifiable as separate from each other. How is it that the mind, while not having a specific location, pervades the whole body and experiences sensations? If the body is the support and the mind is the supported, and the body is external and the mind is internal, then they are like a person and their clothing. When sensations are experienced, if you think that it is only the body that experiences sensations, then a corpse would also experience sensations. On the other hand, you may think that the mind experiences sensations. If mind and body are different, how is it that the mind, which cannot be killed or cut, can experience the body being pricked with a thorn? Would that not be like saying that when someone's clothing, the support, is burned, the person, the support, is also burned? You must look well and reach a conclusion. At this point, you should recognize that all thoughts and feelings are mind, like waves on water, and rest in that. So waves on water, implying that thoughts and feelings are the waves and mind is the water. And rest in that in order to become certain about the abiding state. While resting in that recognition, look, as has been described. And that was the third session. So many confusing questions. This guy is very, just like constantly asking all these difficult questions. I don't know if I was able to answer any one of those questions. So traditionally in Tibet, they would do each of these separately for like a long period of time. I remember Khandra Rinpoche, Mingyur Khandra Rinpoche, talking about doing this practice with, I think, her father in her monastic training, and being forced to look for the mind everywhere physically. And like, if she or anyone came back and said, well, it's not a physical thing, so there's no point in looking for, he would yell at them or something and say, look for your mind. And there was something about how either she ended up, or they all ended up, or her father recounted how when he did it, they went through or they were made to look at every object in the entire monastery, sort of like under carpets, behind cabinets, under tables, under chairs, to look for their mind. Just like really literally looking for the mind everywhere.
Scavenger
All
hunt.
possibilities. Scavenger hunt, yeah. And like being forced to do that. Zeke.
There's something really intricate that's asked of us as readers here. Because, on the one hand, I'm giving you the answer. On the other hand, I want you to have a lot of integrity in not just taking the answer conceptually and intellectually and really coming to it from experience. The guru is looking for, it's almost like a certain kind of quality or virtue that's like being asked of us. And I wanted to just ask you about that, because I don't think I've ever heard anybody articulate that as like a virtue you need on the path. Like for all I know from this text, like you just need stability, right? Like do a lot of shamatha, get stability, then bam, you're ready for this. But no, it seems like you need stability, and you also need to be a relentless truth teller about your own ego. And like, what's the Tibetan word for the thing that he wants us to have, and where is that described?
Yeah, well, Trungpa Rinpoche used genuineness, I think, as that word of like being like honest and being completely genuine with yourself, of like, yeah, I don't understand this, so I need to look. Even though he gave me the answer, I need to look. And yeah, that's like taken for granted, I think, with them. However, there is also the wrinkle that books were not that prevalent in Tibet, like at the days these were written. And basically, the teachers would have the books, and the students would not have a copy of the book. And so the teacher would have the they would read the questions, and then they would maybe withhold the answer, or maybe not, depending on the situation and their feeling about the students. And we see these parts of the text where it says the master should question the student, and that dynamic. And so these are clearly also clearly manuals for the master, and as in guiding their students.
So we're looking at a multiple test book.
Right, right. But on the other hand, you don't see anyone these days saying, "Well, let's separate the answers. Let's publish a version where the answers are at least in the back, and we trust you not to look at them." Nobody says that. Yeah, there's like it's implicit that you're going to have this sense of honesty, of still pursuing the investigation, even though you've read that the result is there's no difference, basically, in all of these. So yeah, that's a huge part of it, and it's sort of, in some way, it's not that hard, because the litmus test is, if you haven't experienced letting go, which I think is the genuine result of actually genuinely experiencing the inexplicable inseparability of all these different aspects of the mind, then you're still you haven't really got it, you know. And that getting it would be quite quite a clear experience.
Well, that
Any other
also
comment?
seems to be an undertone is you can have these experiences, but you've got to really do it again over and over to validate. Is it genuine or not? Validation. Like, don't think, oh, I got it. You got to
Yeah, yeah,
validate. Was that
yeah.
real?
But go back to the triad of it, understanding, experience, and then realization. Yeah, so we read it, okay, we sort of understand the exercise. Probably have to read it a few times to really understand it. And, hopefully we've all now read it twice, at least once before, and then now together. And many of us have read this before, and hopefully all of us will read it again. So you have some sort of intellectual understanding of it, and then we apply it in our practice. And we haven't really talked about that, but the general recommendation is that since the likelihood of experiencing, full, complete shamatha in the way it's described here is pretty slim, we uh, we don't put off vipassana until that happens. But I think at this point, all of us here have been practicing for many, many years, and we have glimpses and a sense of what the stillness is. And on that sense, we can have we can do a practice in our session of when we reach a point in our session where we feel a stability in our state of mind, we can then bring up these investigations. And it's always recommended we do it in that way. Start with shamatha for a certain period of time, and then do some sort of vipassana, and then come back to shamatha. And that generally it's suggested that the vipassana involves at least two phases of the intellectual inquiry, the investigation, like of going through these questions, and then the feeling, letting the feeling of those exercises, sort of releasing the words, releasing the intellectual effort and the complexity, and just sort of letting go into whatever sense of experience of inseparability, or whatever the resulting experience is that you might have, and resting in that. And ideally, it's some sense of not finding, generally, is the idea of like not being able to pin down your mind and its contents or experience or qualities in any way at all, basically. And not able to find who is the one that's unable to do that. And so then it's up to us, like we have these manuals now, to what extent we want to do them, and to what level of thoroughness. Do you want to go through all these steps, and do you want to like set yourself a project? Maybe you go on retreat, and you're going to do day one, you're going to basically read through all the shamatas every day. Some people will like read through them every session, or they'll read through the shamatha to sort of establish a sense of shamatha, and then they'll pick one of the vipassanas and sort of work their way through the vipassanas. There's many ways to do this. And the alternative is, given that we know the answer, and that we know also that basically the crux of the investigation is looking for the sense of the looker, you can also sort of abbreviate the process by establishing shamatha and looking for who's meditating, and just do that. Like, who's meditating, and who's looking at who's meditating. And in my humble opinion, that's basically the essence of it. And as you get drawn away into thoughts or emotions or other things come up, you can also look at those and see, well, where are those in the space of my mind? Is my mind spacious enough for those thoughts, and what does that mean? And where are they, to the extent that you get drawn away from it, because looking directly at the looker is very difficult, right? It's like the two magnets coming together of the same polarity. The positives, they repel each other. And when you look at the looker, that happens. It's like this quality of fluttering. But either way, then you want to rest and let go and let whatever, like, sort of non-confirmation of intellectual result or finding seep in to your mind, to your sort of your body. It's like we're at some point we're working on like a reflexive quality of trying to comprehend what's going on, right? We're always like trying to figure out, who's on first, what's on second, that sort of thing, right? And when we do that, we structure our world in subject object, and you're implicitly doing that with your mind. Every time there's a change in scene, or every time we pay attention, and so we're trying to get to the point where we notice that that's happening and relaxing it, I think. Anyway, let's pause there, and we'll continue next week, and we can revisit the idea of like, how do we actually practice this realistically in our own world. Any final comments? Mary Beth.
Guillermo Dorje. Guillermo Dorje is the translator.
Guillermo Dorje.
Guillermo
Cool. Thank
Dorje,
you.
yeah.
Okay.
And Elizabeth Callahan does the next one. Maybe there's a extensive thematic concordance of terminology in that one, and she explains some things. And if so, I'll share, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Guillermo Dorje. In changeless, indestructible, right? Guillermo is changeless. May is without, and Gur is change or continuing. Right? Changeless.
Great name.
People have that like in refuge and bodhisattva names. You'll hear changeless, devotion, or whatever, renunciation. Anyway, let's conclude. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara. May I free all beings by the confidence of the golden sun of the great east. May the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you. Have a great week. See you soon. And Chris, have a great
Enjoy the bonfire.
bonfire. And have a great time at the bonfire and the retreat. Look forward to
That's
hearing
incredible.
about
I
it.
have to get over there right now.
Yeah,
Over
go
here.
there. I want to hear your bodhisattva name. Okay,
All
take
right,
care.
that's right. I'm taking refuge.
Bodhisattva, yeah.
Yeah.